Today's Pitch Perfect Day is co-presented by A&E Indie Films. So each day, as you know, we start off with a morning manifesto. This is a half-hour session where we bring up someone that we admire a lot and try to get as much information as we can out of them in a short amount of time. Today, we are very pleased to have Stanley Nelson. A few days ago, on Thursday, at our annual Visionaries Tribute, we gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award. And before I bring him to stage, I want to show you a short reel that kind of gives an overview of his career that we created for the Lifetime Achievement Award. Go ahead and run that reel. So if you go to the Doc NYC Fest YouTube page, you'll can see Stanley receiving his award on Thursday and in the 5-minute speech he gave. And in those remarks, Stanley, you said something about history, telling history, and the histories that don't get told that feel pertinent to this moment. I wonder if you can reprise those thoughts.
Well, I think one of the things that I said was that I felt that, you know, one of the things that we're seeing in this country is that the full story of America hasn't been told. And I think, you know, it leads to certain things that I don't want to mention because I'm trying to ignore the whole election right now. But I think that it's really important that we tell the whole story of the United States and tell the whole story of the world. And one of the things that I'm really committed to is for people to tell their own stories, because I think it's really important that we tell our own stories.
So what I want to do in the time I have with you today is pick 5 films from your career and just try to take some quick takes about what you learned in these films. So I want to start with $2 and a Dream, which was your first film about the first about Madam C.J. Walker, who created an empire out of black hair care products and was the first black woman millionaire in the U.S. or black
millionaire. The first woman who started with nothing and earned $1 million.
Yeah,
black or white.
So so this is your first film. What did you learn on your first film?
You know, I think I learned a bit of everything. That was my first film. I directed it, I produced it, I was one of the writers, I edited it, I was the sound person. So, I learned a lot. I mean, I think one of the things that I learned, though, in looking back, was that it can be done. Because I did this film totally independently, raising money from here and there. Finally I raised it from individual donors. We made the film, and it premiered on PBS in prime time. So, I learned that it could be done, and that these stories were stories that were pertinent to everybody in the country. Yeah, I also learned a lot of other things about how to make a film and how not to make a film, but I learned a lot.
We saw in that little sample reel a clip where you're speaking on camera, and it's from your film, A Place of Our Own, about Martha's Vineyard and the African-American community there. So this is a film unusual in your body of work where you're putting yourself in it. It's a kind of first-person work. And I wonder what you took away from doing that.
That I never wanted to do it again. That was the first thing. I'm not a personal filmmaker. So I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do, which is make personal films. But I also learned that personal films really can connect with audiences in a very different way if they do connect with audiences. About 2 years after the film came out, I was swimming in Martha's Vineyard, and this kid came up to me. He's about 12, and he said, "Hey, you're the guy who did that film. Hey, you're the guy who did that film." And I said, "Yeah, that was me." And he said, "Well, it's really made me want to treat my sister better than I ever treated her." And I mean, and nobody says that about the murder of Emmett Till or Madam C.J. Walker. So I think you can really connect. I think the other thing I learned about personal film, and the thing we struggled with was, how do you make a personal film relevant to other people, and how does it not become just kind of navel gazing, and how does it become something bigger? I should say that one thing I learned about personal films is that film was very highly orchestrated and very highly scripted. We had a script that I remember at one point, as you do scripts, you have different versions, and we were on version 82 of the script. So we had lots of, and I went into a booth and read the narration. And the trick is for it to sound like it's coming off the top of your head, but really it's written. And so I was in a booth reading, and the writer, associate producer, and editor were outside the booth, and I would say, last year my mother died, and it broke my heart. And they would say, okay, now say it with a little more emotion. Last year, when my mother died, that's too much emotion. So it's all a film. So also when people come up and say, I saw some people in the elevator one time in a hotel, and they said, oh, I saw your film, I feel like I know you. And I want to say, no, you don't. You saw a film. It's a piece of film. So I learned that, again, it's as constructed, if not more constructed, than a historical film.
We saw a clip in there about your film Jonestown, about the massacre in Guyana of the people who were following Jim Jones there. One thing that was a real revelation to me, I was a young kid when that happened, but it was very prominent in my mind from that time. And I hadn't really thought about it that much since. In your film, you really draw out how much of an African-American community had been drawn down there. That was a total revelation to me. But that's a film that's a pretty dark chapter of history, and I can imagine that the eyewitnesses to it, of whom you interview many, it must be a hard thing for them to go back to. Unlike, say, freedom riders, where people are proud to have lived through that history, eager to share their stories, I can imagine Jonestown, it was more of a tougher slog. And I wonder, what you took away from approaching that kind of chapter of history that people might be unwilling to revisit.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I did, in making that film, and that we all did, is we said early on that, we weren't going to try to convince people to be in the film, to tell us their stories, because usually, as producers of documentary films, that's one of the things you do. You tell a cop, who dealt with the Black Panthers, you say, this is really your chance to tell your side of the story, and you really want to do that, and we become really good at trying to convince people to be part of the story. But in Jonestown,
And there's truth in that.
yeah, there's some truth in that. There is. I mean, there's a basic basis of truth in that. But in Jonestown, we felt that we didn't want to really convince people. We just wanted to meet people. We tried to have people not tell us no on the phone. That's one of the things that I try to do all the time is say, don't tell me no on the phone. Let's meet and let's talk a little bit about what we're doing. And then in Jonestown, we said, if you decide not to do it, I'll leave you my number, and if you change your mind, call me. But I'm not going to press. I'm not going to press you to do it. And there were some people that didn't. We met with a husband and wife, and this is years later, and they kind of got together after Jonestown, years after, and they had kids who were maybe in college who didn't know anything about that they were ever part of People's Temple. And I totally understood why they might not want to talk about it. And so they never agreed to do it, and they're not in the film. But I think that really helped. I think also one of the things that also helps with people being convinced to do stuff, now is that, people look on the internet. And so when you go to see them, they kind of have an idea who you are. And so they kind of knew, the other films that I had made, and they knew that, I wasn't, kind of going after cheap thrills. So I think that also helped in getting people But it was really a hard film to do because the sadness that surrounded some of the people that we filmed was just, I mean, it was unimaginable. You know, it just consumed you. You know, like one woman that we filmed, a black woman from Indiana. She heard Jim Jones speak, and she said, well, you know, and she had 5 kids, and she told her 5 kids, you know, and her husband, I'm joining People's Temple, and you can either come with me or not, but I'm joining People's Temple, and she joined People's Temple, and ended up in Guyana, and she had been off Guyana for a while, and she was in the airport when they committed suicide, and all her kids died. And that's a sadness that this, you know, was this aura around this woman. And there were tale after tale like that, because obviously we're talking to the people who survived. And, you know, Jonestown and the People's Temple was this all-consuming thing. So when you were in People's Temple, those were the only people that you knew. So basically everybody that you knew, including all your relatives, died at the same time. And for whatever reason, the people that we're interviewing lived on. So it was a hard film. It was a hard film to make. It was a hard film for all of us. It was one of those films where, you know, everybody on the crew was coming down with illnesses and other things, because it was just rough.
Later today, we have a conversation called Insider versus Outsider Storytelling. That's all about the perspective you bring to telling a story. Largely, your body of work is about African American history. A film that stands out is your film on Wounded Knee. And I wonder if you can talk about your reflections on, you know, approaching a film that was, you know, outside of your own journey in African American history.
Sure. Let me tell you the story of what happened with Wounded Knee. I had worked with American Experience on a couple of other films, The Murder of Emmett Till. I think Jonestown came before that. A couple of other films that we had worked on with American Experience, and they were going to do this 6-part series on Native American history called We Shall Remain. And they called me up to direct one of the shows on Wounded Knee. And I said, well, you know, you should get some Native American director to do this. I mean, you know, this show on Native Americans. And they said, we can't find any. And, you know, we're hiring Native American associate producers because we can't find enough people with qualifications. And I said, well, who are the other directors that you've hired? Have you hired other people? And they had hired a bunch of other directors for the other shows, and they were all white. And so at that point, I said, okay, fine. I'll, you know, okay, you know, I'll do it. But that was the reason why I kind of did that show. And my associate producer became actually a co-producer by the time we finished. He got a co-producer credit on the film.
And how was it, you know, in that experience?
You know, it was in some ways a fantastic experience. Hold on, I got an important call here. I'm sorry about that. As I got stuck on the train. If anybody took the A train or that line this morning, they know it took me an hour and something to get here, so I didn't have a chance to turn off my phone.
We're grateful for the effort.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I couldn't stop because I couldn't get off the train. So, anyway.
Turns out the A train is not the quickest way from Harlem.
Right. What was the question?
On Wounded Knee, you know, I mean, you talked about your complicated feelings accepting the job, but, you know, once on the job, you know, how was it to bring your outsider's perspective to that story?
You know, I think it was a great experience for me. I didn't lose my feeling that people need to tell the stories from inside. I think that's really important. The series had one Native American director, Dustin Craig, I believe his name is, who did a film that was just extraordinary. I think it was a little deeper than everybody else's because I think he was on the inside in a different way. He could kind of go underneath the surface in a way we couldn't. But you know, the Native American community is incredible. You know, the way they look at life in this country is very different from, I think, everybody else. And to have a window into that for a minute was a good experience.
Yeah. So I want to talk about your most recent film with Black Panthers. Last year it was on our short list of films that we find to be amongst the most distinguished of the year. Now, when it comes to Black Panthers, it's such a contested chapter of history, not just between people who like the Black Panthers and don't like the Black Panthers, but even within the Black Panthers themselves, there are fiercely contested factions. So what was it like to navigate those those warring parties?
Hell, how's that? One word, one word answer. It was hell. I mean, I think that one of the things that helped us was that we had to take a break because I was doing two films at once, the first time in my life. So I'm working on the Black Panthers and Freedom Summer, and I was literally going crazy. I mean, there are filmmakers who make 5 films at once, and I don't know how they do it. But so I was going crazy. I was up at night, and it was just nuts. Trying to make 2 films at once, and the editor of the Panthers had to leave because of health problems, his mother's health problems. And at that point, because Freedom Summer had to be done that year, it had to be done for the anniversary year of 2014, we shut down Panthers for a while and finished Freedom Summer and then came back to Panthers. But what it did was, when we shut down, it made me realize that, I had kind of tiptoed around the Panthers enough. I had, been nice. I had, begged people. I had, listened to their little petty arguments and stuff like that from 50 years ago. At that point, it became like, okay, fine. If you want to be in the film or not, because we're making the film, and it's up to you. If you don't want to be in it, that's fine. If you do, let's go. And so, I think that decision that we had to make our film. And then the chips had to fall where they may. I think that really is what helped me to kind of just go on and make the film. And there are people who are not in the film. Bobby Seale, one of the leaders of the Panthers, we can never get him to agree to be in the film. But I feel very good about that because I know I did everything I possibly could to get Bobby to agree to be in the film. And sometimes it just doesn't work out.
Yeah. To conclude, I want to ask you about your organization, Firelight Media, that you started to give other young filmmakers training and encouragement to make their films. I'd love to hear what you've learned about mentoring young people that that anyone in the room could apply in their own work. I mean, in the world of independent documentary film, there's never a lot of resources to go around, and people are often so stressed out just focusing on their work that the idea of making extra time for mentoring or trying to spread some of your thin resources to help others is beyond what you can handle. But what are some things you've learned about mentoring?
Well, first, I want to say that we're going to need mentoring. We're going to need to pull together as a filmmaking community now more than ever. That's what's going to happen. So many things are going to disappear. When we had the last Republican administration, PBS went into this kind of cycle where they only wanted to do patriotic films. The films had to have a patriotic bent, At the same time, Congress was trying to kill PBS. So that's going to happen again. And so I think it's really important that as independent filmmakers that we really, pull together and support each other and realize that we are a community. I think one of the things that's inspired me to do what we do at the documentary lab, that's what it's called at Firelight, is when I came up, I came up and there were still government programs. There were still, a lot of the TV stations had internship programs. WNET, other stations had programs to help train people and get people in the industry. You know, because I came up, you know, in the 70s where, you know, we're talking about a time where there were no people of color in the industry, and after the civil rights movement, you know, people kind of looked around and said, "Oh, whoa, there's nobody." So there were these programs that pretty much have disappeared. And also, I had great help in my career from mentors. So we wanted to start a mentorship program at Firelight, and so it's been hugely successful. I think we've been going. I don't remember how many years. You know how many years? 7 years we've been going, and we have 15. I think it's 18 films. I think it's 15, 18 films that have been on television, full-length films. One of our films, National Bird, just opened at Cinema Villages on Friday. We had 3 films in the Tribeca Film Festival. And so, you know, I think it's really important that we mentor people. And I found it to be incredibly rewarding to work with young filmmakers, or, you know, and some of our filmmakers aren't that young. You know, these are first-time filmmakers. So a lot of times they're people who have been in the industry. We have a heavy weight of women in the program, and a lot of times what happens for women is they become, you know, the great associate producers or researchers, and, you know, like kind of like the helpmates to the men filmmakers. And it's like, okay, you know, how do you push forward? How do you break through that ceiling and become, you know, your own producer and director? And so that's kind of what we've been trying to do is help people. And I think, you know, when we went into the doc lab, the idea, excuse me, we had, you know, two big thoughts. One was that, again, there were filmmakers out there who had great projects. You know, okay, we're like going on faith. And 2, that we can raise money to keep this thing going. We found great filmmakers, and that's worked. And you know, it's been a struggle to find money, but we have found money and have been able to keep going. You know, it's very different from making a film, which we didn't kind of think through when we started the lab. When you make a film, you raise the money and you make the film, and you're good. You know, with the lab, we're kind of always in this kind of money raising mode, because it has to constantly, you know, keep going. But it's been great, and it's been recognized. And one of the things I think that's happening is that now other organizations are starting their own kind of mentorship programs and things. And I think that part of it, a little part of it, is they're seeing the success of the lab. We were recognized last year by the MacArthur, you know, who give the Genius Awards. So we got kind of, they have this new thing where they give Genius Awards for institutions, and we got an award from MacArthur for the lab.
Well, I hope you get a lot more of where that came from. If you know, you're new to some of these films, I hope you look up Black Panthers, which is out there, available on the Sundance Now platform that I curate. You can watch one of Stanley's early films, The Black Press, and I think we have A Place of Our Own on there. So we're really grateful to you for coming out this morning.